In this video, we'll try to understand what exactly are fluent interfaces and method chaining. Now, both of these concepts are very much related to each other, or I'll say, one is a concept and other is the implementation to that concept. So in this single video itself, I'm going to cover both fluent interfaces and method chaining. So what I'll do is I'll first start with fluent interfaces and then I will move towards method chaining. Now, object-oriented programming is the most accepted way of designing and programming in C#. And this object-oriented programming has two aspects. One aspect, where the developer actually goes and creates a class, he actually exposes out properties. And the other aspect is where a consumer actually creates the object of the class and tries to use that class. So for example, you can have a simple customer class here, with probably full name, date of birth and address property. So this part can be created by some developer. He can use proper object-oriented principles like abstraction, encapsulation, and ensure that, the interfaces are simple, right? And then there can be other aspect, where there is a consumer who actually consumes this class by creating a customer object, by setting the properties, by invoking the methods. Now, most of the time, this consumer and creator. So when I say creator, the person who creates a class, and consumer means actually who uses the class. Most of the time, they are both the same persons. So it is the same developer who creates a class and it's the same developer who actually creates the object, and uses it. But there can be situations where the consumer and creator are different people. So for example, it is possible that, one programmer creates a class and there is another programmer who is working on a user interface and he is actually your consumer, right? Second, let's say that you are into component selling, like companies like Telerik or Infragistic, who actually makes components and it is consumed by developer community, right? So in those cases, again, the creator of the class is different and the consumer of the class is different, and they are both different entities altogether. Now, fluent interfaces have more to do with the consumer part of the code. So you can see now currently the consumer code is actually creating a customer object, setting the full name and date of birth, address. So if you ask any object-oriented programmer or a C# developer, saying that is this code complicated, he will say no. This I have been doing day and night, and this is absolutely not complicated. But now think about that the consumer of this class is a unit test developer, a person who is doing unit test on your class, and he really does not understand C#. Or think, that you are a component seller and you want to really please your consumers, or you want to really please your people who consume your components with interfaces which are more simplified than this. So what will you do about it? And that's where exactly fluent interfaces come into picture. Fluent interfaces simplify your class consumption code by making your code more simple, readable, and discoverable. So for instance, over here, where we are creating the customer object by using the new keyword and, doing a lot of things. If we can do something like this, if we can say like this, saying that customer dot name of the person is Shiv, born, 1/1/2008. By the way, that is not my date of birth. Dot stays at, Mumbai. So if I can create, such kind of interface, where it is like, speaking a sentence, that would really make my, this class consumption code more simplified and more readable. So the next thing is, how do we go about, achieving this thing? To achieve this thing, we have something called as method chaining. Method chaining is a common technique, where each method returns an object, and all of these objects can be chained together to form a single simple statement. So for example, here you can see this name of the person actually, will return some class. In turn, that class will have this method called as born. He will again return a class. He will have a method called as stays at. So you can see now, by chaining these methods, we are actually creating a sentence saying that, okay, name of the person is Shiv, who is born at 1/1/2008 and stays at Mumbai. So in order to implement method chaining, what we'll do is we'll create a wrapper class around this customer class and we'll hide all those complicated properties, and that wrapper class will emit out fluent interface, and the consumer can interact via the fluent interface. So let me go ahead and create a class here called as the customer fluent class. And this customer fluent class will be a wrapper around the customer class. So I'm going to go and create a private customer object, and this private customer object will be encapsulated by the customer fluent class. So now the next step is, let us go ahead and create our fluent interface, and via those fluent interfaces we will expose this encapsulated customer object out. So let's start with the first fluent interface, or I'll say let's start with the first fluent interface method name, that is name of the person. So what we'll do is, so let's go ahead and create a method here called as name of the person, and this name of the person will take person name. Now, in order to ensure that this method actually becomes a part of the method chain, we need to ensure that this method actually exposes out the customer fluent class. Why? Because we would like to have a method chain like this: name of the person, born, stays at, right? So what I've done is, the name of the person actually exposes out the customer fluent class, and in this what it does is it actually sets the name of the person. Now what I'll do is, let me go and change this variable to full name. Why? Because we have an inconsistency here. So you can see I'm saying person name and the property name is full name, right? So let me just go and change this to full name, just to ensure that we are consistent across the project. And once this property is set, what we'd like to do is we'd like to return back the object from this method. So you can see I'm saying return this. So this actually returns the object via this method name of the person. Now let's take the second method. The second method is born, and so I will go and create an interface method here called as born, and this born actually what it does is it actually goes and sets the date of birth of the OBJ customer, right? The third fluent interface method name is stays at. So let us go ahead and create a method called as stays at, and this method will actually take an address, and it will set the address of the customer object to address what is passed from the method. Now this stays at method, it actually is the end of the fluent interface statement. So you can see that the fluent interface starts with name of the person. So here we have to expose out the customer fluent class. Then we have born. So here we have to expose out customer fluent class. But this stays at method actually marks the end of the statement, right? So here we have to just say void. And that's it. So we have implemented method chaining, and indirectly we have implemented fluent interfaces. So now what I can do is I don't need to write all these cryptic statements here. So what I can do is I can say here customer fluent obj equal to new customer fluent, and I can say here obj dot, so the name of the person is Shiv. Now you can look at how the interfaces are getting simplified. Dot, so Shiv was born in 1/1/2008, and he stays at Mumbai, right? So you can see now this interface here is more simplified as compared to this interface where we were creating the object, we were passing the properties, we were getting into what you call data type conversion, etc. So if I now run this application, so I'm going to put a debug point here, and I'm going to press F5, and if you now see, so you can see this obj object here, and you can see that he has set all the values Shiv, Mumbai, and date of birth. So the next question comes to our mind is that is it good if we create fluent interfaces always? Now if you are creating fluent interfaces for developers, then probably you are wasting your time, frankly. And I'm sorry to be harsh here, because developers are consistent with creating objects with new keyword, setting properties. So, something if you give them which is very different, which is not consistent, then probably you will find that you are adding more complexity than simplifying it. And second thing we need to understand is we need to write a lot of code here. You can see that I created a separate class, and that class was actually wrapping up the main customer class. So we need to understand that we need to write more amount of code to create fluent interfaces, right? As we saw in the code which I demonstrated in the video. But said and done, there are few instances, when you need fluent interfaces, and some of them are as follows. For instance, when you have unit test developers who are not full-fledged programmers, must be they are scripting programmers who understand scripting, right? So at that time, this new keyword, convert to date and time and all those things, probably they will not like it. It's very difficult for them to grasp. So a fluent interface like this, can really help them out. The other instance, where I find fluent interfaces very useful is you want your code to be more readable by non-programmers. For example, you consume the class, and let's say a business guy comes in and he sees that code and he says, okay, this is right. So in other words, for non-programmers, who are probably business users, if you want to make them understand, that your code actually satisfies the domain logic or not. The third instance, where I find fluent interfaces very useful is, when you are a component seller like Telerik or Infragistic. So you want to stand out in the market. You want to ensure that your client consumption code is very simple, right? So your class which has to be consumed is very simple, or the code is very simple. Then probably again I find fluent interfaces very useful. The last point is, if you're creating a DSL language, that is a domain specific language, then you would like to map this DSL language with the fluent interface statements. So these are some of the places, where you will find fluent interfaces very useful. But in general, if you are just talking about pure object-oriented programming and consuming them as a programmer, fluent interfaces really will not be useful. And some of the places, where fluent interfaces are already used are like, for example, link queries. If you see the link query statements, you can understand that, these are actually fluent interfaces. Unit testing, if you see the code of VSTS unit test, you will find that asserts.r equal, so these kind of sentences, clearly indicate that these are fluent interfaces. Mock testing. If you look at mock testing tool like Rhino Mocks, or must be Just Mock, or must be MOQ Mock, or probably if you are seeing those new Visual Studio 2012 mocking tool like Fakes and Shims, right? They are again using what you call fluent interfaces. So if you see, for example, here the MOQ mock testing statement is something like container.getMock, setup, what to return, and verifiable, etc. And the last place, where you find fluent interfaces very useful is when you are using a DSL language. Now, a DSL language, it is meant for simple users who do not understand programming. So for example, the simple users can go and type on the console application or some screen, saying that task, won if the website is live. So he will actually go and type English statements, and then you would like to map these English statements, to some fluent interface like this. So again, when you're talking about DSL language, which are specifically meant for people who are non-programmers, again, fluent interfaces are useful. So some of the places, where you will find fluent interfaces very much, present now is LinkQ, unit testing, mock testing, DSL, etc. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. In this video, we were trying to understand what exactly are fluent interfaces, how we can implement fluent interfaces by using method chaining. And then we also later saw that, in what kind of scenarios fluent interfaces are useful. And we also talked about, currently, where fluent interfaces are used. Thank you so much.